This is Ryan and Michelle, and welcome to the Celebrate MarriageCast, where we hope to restore and reclaim godly marriages through honest and real conversations.
Welcome to episode 35. That's a really fun number, 35. Yeah. We're really getting up there. That's amazing. Thank you to our listeners for joining us. Today, we have a special guest back. We have Tony Boer of Sioux Empire Christian Counseling. So, Tony, welcome to our show. And we are here for our counseling session.
Yeah.
First of all, great. It's great to be back. Thanks for having me back. So you guys need a counseling session.
And we're going to let everyone listen.
I'm seeing a little bit on your social media. It looks like it's been a really busy week for you guys. Why don't you tell me a little bit about how that all went down and the smoothness and how it was all cool and there was no stress and you're perfectly great.
Great.
Yeah.
No, but tell me a little bit about what happened.
Yeah. So as we're sitting on the couch here, I'll share with you.
Yeah, it is like a counseling session.
Yeah.
I really like
this. So, I mean, obviously, Tony, May is a time, graduation season, and if you followed along with us, our daughter graduated high school. And with graduation comes a lot of transitions in life. A lot of things are changing, and a lot of, our daughter's growing up and some of those things. So, really, it's a season of transitions. Maybe it's a different, becoming empty nesters. Maybe it's, your family is getting smaller. And, I know for us, Michelle, you can jump in here. This past week has just been exhausting, very emotional.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of emotions kind of run through our house. I've had a lot of emotions.
Yeah. And you're not really a super emotional guy. And I think that actually made Ella then emotional. She was like, Pa. She's like, I heard that you were sad. And then her eyes welled up. And yeah, so we have Ella who just graduated from high school, super early. I mean, not early for her, but like just graduation weekend was early this year. So she's done with high school. And I think on so many different levels, it felt, I don't know, just bittersweet. And then you kind of just feel bad too. Like, oh, why am I sad? I should be so happy. She's spreading her wings and all of that. But one of the things, Ryan, you shared for our story is that, you had shared, and this choked me up when you said it, but Ella really got you through some really dark times in your life. Yeah. You were a widower with a baby girl. Yeah. And now to see this beautiful young woman, she's all grown up, but it's like they have so much really, just so much history during that time and all of the times. And then I came in, I met Ella when she was 4, and it feels like I blinked, and now she's going. And I think part of it too is like, we have Thomas, he's in 3rd grade. Ella found out she was going to be a big sister when she was in 3rd grade. And now it's like, oh my gosh, just like that. He's in 3rd grade. And so some of us grieving too, like he's going to grow up the rest of his elementary and middle school and high school years without this incredible big sister at home. So it's like figuring out all of that. And then just the outpouring of the weekend. Oh my gosh, I didn't know graduation weekend would be such a physical and emotional and mental drain.
Right.
You said you almost fell asleep at work today.
Yeah. Don't say that. No.
We can edit that out.
Right. But no, I
like
think
exhausted.
It's almost like, I told Michelle, Tony, it's almost like joy and sorrow like crash together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when you guys are talking about transitions, that's one of the tricky things is you're having so many dual emotions at the same time, right? It's like there's this sadness that this piece is ending. We're excited that this is this whole new chapter and this is how it's supposed to be, right? There's this whole piece of we're supposed to celebrate. Hey, she's gone through high school and she's graduated and this is great and cool and awesome. Why are we sad? Well, we're going to miss them. And so there's so many of those dual feelings or multiple feelings happen at the same time. And then you guys are both having them at the same time. So one of you may be super up and excited and happy that this is great. And the other one's like, no, I'm really kind of sad and I'm going to miss this. And then you switch over. And so that's that part where it is exhausting and it gets tired because you're trying to help each other and go through this and you're at different spots and you're at the same spot. And it's just so many emotions.
Yeah. I think what you said about people being in different spots at different times too, when When you said that, I thought of Saturday night, Ryan, you were just laying on the bed and you were like, I feel so sad. And I was like, love, what can I do for you? And I felt kind of helpless as a spouse. I was like, I don't know what to do for you. Like, just sat there and listened. And, and that's when you started kind of reflecting about why it was hitting you in such a way. But, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's hard, and I don't know. I'm not trying to generalize, but this is just me. It's hard. I realize I struggle with working through emotions and like actually feeling it.
Well, most men do.
Yeah.
Right. If we want to generalize, it's like trying to even figure out what it is to name it. How can I? So when you ask him, how can I help you? Right. You're like, I'm having trouble just even naming and figuring out how I'm feeling, let alone what I actually need to feel better. And so there's that whole piece sometimes where you're trying to be really caring. What can I do to help you? And that other person's like, you're just asking me to work more and I can't even work. I'm just empty. Yeah.
Yeah. How does, we talked a lot about even going into the week of like kind of preparing each other of just like, hey, like, we know this week's going to be challenging.
Yeah.
And just, we had talked about this of being like, hey, like we just need to be very gentle with each other this week.
Yeah, that was a great word.
And also very much like, okay, hey, like if we don't feel like making dinner, let's just just order something. Like it's okay.
That was really helpful, Ryan, because when you gave us that permission, not that like I need permission to order DoorDash, but just setting the expectations for the week when you were like, I know you have your whole menu plan, but let's be realistic. If you want to just order food, if we need to, like, let's just do it. Let's be really gentle. And that did come in really helpful because I feel like there was a moment when I had ordered something DoorDash and everyone came home and we had to be out the door for baccalaureate in like 30 minutes. And then there was a ring on our doorbell and I was like, surprise, I ordered dinner. So we had food and that was great.
Yeah. So maybe Tony, like what advice would you give? I mean, for couples that, for us, it was graduation, but as they see these things approaching, let's just say graduation. I mean, is there any advice that you would give couples as they're approaching this?
Yeah. And I think you guys hit on it. We're like, you have to realize what you have planned probably isn't going to work because with all these emotions and these things going on. And so some of that is just really helping each other to communicate that you're not always going to know what you need, right? And which that means sometimes you're going to be short and crabby or sometimes you're going to be short and crabby. And if you know that going in, it's like, why are you always short? It's like, just let this slide, lets this go, and then have that conversation, but just remember when you're having all these transitions, right, and for you guys, you have a new one. Your kid is going off to college. But to remember, you've done this before. And what I mean is you've had transitions before, right? Think about when your kid's a newborn, right? There's parents are always like, how am I going to know when to bring the kid to the doctor? I don't know. And then what happens? You're in that. You kind of figure it out and it kind of goes, right? Or when your daughter turns to adolescence. Have you ever had an adolescent before? Nope, never had one before. Okay, but what happens? It's bumpy, right? It's new, but you figure it out. And that would be the same thing I would tell all the people that are going through transitions now with graduations and kids going, hey, you have never done this before, but yet you kind of have.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
This is something new and different, but you guys have adjusted, you have figured things out, and you will get there. And you will figure that out. It's new, but it's kind of that whole same thing as you go through it together, like, oh, I think we can get this. I think we can figure this out. And it takes a little time, right? For me, I have a funny story just from being an empty nester is my twins were seniors in college and my son was a sophomore in college. So they had been out of the house for about 2 years. So me and my wife had finally just kind of settled into, hey, I think we're getting this. This is fun. It's just the two of us. We're kind of figuring this new routine out. And then COVID hit. And they all came back. So all of a sudden, boom, everybody came back into the house. So we weren't empty nesters anymore. It was the same thing. It was like, we have to adjust to this.
Yeah.
And then we had to adjust back when they all left, right? But it just takes time, and it was a new thing. We adjusted to when they were gone, adjusted to then they all came back. That was a little hairy for a little while.
I was going to say, that's kind of a rude awakening.
Yes,
like,
like,
oh my
we
gosh.
were kind of liking this. This was okay. And get back. But it just takes that time. But to have that confidence to know is you guys can do this. Couples can face these transitions, whatever they happen to be, whether it's graduation, whether it's a job loss, whether that's marriage, remarriage, doing these things. Like, hey, we can do this, right? Couples can have these transitions. It's the same thing as what we always talk about here. If you're communicating, if you're talking, right? And acknowledging you don't always know what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
If you pretend like, oh yeah, we got this, we're good. Man, that's a mess. It's way easier. What are you doing? I don't know. I haven't done this before. I'm trying to figure this out. Even just that little story you guys were talking about. You're, hey, Ryan, you okay? I don't know. I'm just kind of sitting on the couch or the bed, just trying to like figure this out. I don't even know if this is normal or not, but I think I'm okay. I'm just a little quiet. That's way healthier than going, no, I'm good. I got this, Michelle. We're cool. Because you know he's not, right?
Yeah.
But then as soon as you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, you're like, well, me neither. But now you're together.
Right.
And that's that whole connection that feels great.
And I'm aware that he's not really okay. Like that there's something going on, and I can be a little more gentle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's such power in that. I love that of just acknowledging like, hey, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And honestly, like that's so much of how like I feel like I felt over this last week of just I don't even know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's there's tears, there's joy, there's all of these things. And you know, I mean, I think I probably said that over and over, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what is happening, but I'm acknowledging something's happening.
Right.
You know, instead of just saying, I'm fine, like, and just bottling it in and not ever dealing with it.
And lots of people will do that because you get scared because like all those mixed feelings out once. So then it's like your confidence goes down. Like, okay, this doesn't feel okay. I don't know what I'm doing. So then you just put on this mask. Oh, we're good. Everything's fine. It's okay. And the crazy part is neither one of you have done this before, right? How many kids have you sent off to college? This is the first one, right? So you're not pros at this. And so just slowing down to kind of go, I don't know what I'm doing. I think I'm okay. It's that same sharing those feelings just brings that connection together. And so that's so important when it feels like everything's out of control and a mess. It's like just acknowledging it is like, hey, this is tricky. And with a graduation, it gets really tricky because you have all those other emotions and then you're like, oh, and all these other responsibilities, right? We got to get here. We got to go do this. We want to see this person's house and this person's house. And it's like, and it's just this crazy mess. So you get tired, you want to take a nap.
Yeah. Right.
I appreciate what you said, Tony, about it feeling out of control and just acknowledging it. Because there was a moment where it felt like things just hit you. And I think especially with whether your kid's graduating from preschool or JK or kindergarten or fifth grade or, middle school, there you have all those transitions. And it's like, we were standing in the elementary school. They were doing a senior walkthrough. Thought it was totally fine. And then it's like, they came on and they're like, elementary school, prepare yourself for the graduating seniors. And they played some music. It was like some cheesy song. It wasn't even emotional. And the tears just happened. And it was like, I feel out of like, I didn't even see that coming. And to have like all these things just like all week long, it's like this, special traditional thing. And then this memory. And then people are posting and it's like just there are all these emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just another thing with that, as you're talking, it reminds me of those transitions. So there's so much, right? So you're so empty because you're going through all these emotions. Is really remember it's a lot like when you had a newborn, right? In marriages, one of the most stressful times in marriage is that second year of marriage, because then after that, the couples think, hey, you should have this figured out. We should be good, right? And then the next one is when you have a newborn, because now you have to change all these rules in this transition and you're totally empty. Right. And that's that same thing as you guys just got done going through a week where you're totally empty. And think about this, Michelle, when you're empty, who usually fills you up?
Yeah.
Ryan,
I mean,
right?
should be, our faith, Jesus,
Yeah,
time
yeah.
with God. But
Yeah,
I do
Ryan
turn to
usually,
Ryan. Like,
Ryan
on the
usually fills
daily.
you up. And
Yes.
Ryan, who usually fills you up when you're empty?
Yeah.
Michelle.
Yeah, Michelle,
right? When we're in a transition and you're both kind of empty, that's when it gets a little tricky.
Yeah.
Right? It's like that newborn is this, oh, can you help me? No, I'm frazzled. I got nothing. And it's that same thing. You go through all these emotions and you look over and you're like, hey, can you help me out here? And that other person's like, I'd love to. I have nothing either. Right? And so that's that point where you did a good job of saying, hey, preparing. It's like, we're going to be empty. We're not always going to be good. We may need to change some stuff like the food or different things because we're not always going to be able to fill each other up. And the cool part when you have a strong relationship is you can weather those times because now after things get settled, like, oh, now we can come back and reconnect. Now we can do that. But there's a little bit of those times where you're going to feel empty. You're going to feel alone and you're going to look over and your partner's doing life with you and they're empty as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Tony, thank you for walking us through this.
I'm feeling better.
This past week,
I feel like we did some things right. Things right.
Yeah, absolutely. So we understand that like not everybody is in this season that we are in, but there are other transitions that happen. So maybe walk us through. Maybe some other big life events. Maybe it's a new job or moving or something like that. Maybe walk us through. Obviously, there's emotions and there's different things. I think it's probably similar, but different in the same sense as well. Maybe walk us through. I don't know if you have an example or two to kind of walk through with us.
Yeah, I always have examples because I've been living life doing this. And that's one of the things to remember is all these things when you're having challenges and tricky things with your partner in relationships is you're not alone. Everybody has these. They're all the same, right? And transition, we were talking about this, I remember really clearly the story of my wife wanted to go back to school. She's a teacher. She wanted to go back and get her master's degree. And she's like, hey, Tony, I want to do this. What do you think about this? Right? Yeah, I support you. Cool. Go do that. We're fine. Are you okay with this? It's going to meet some changes. Yep. Cool. We're good. All right. Fast forward. All of a sudden, we're arguing a little more. I'm like, what's going on? We're arguing about chores and things and different stuff. And what had happened is we didn't really prepare for the transition.
Sure.
We talked about it.
Yeah.
It's kind of these broad general terms. But all of a sudden, it was like, I told her I would support her, but I never really thought about what exactly that meant. Oh, that means I'm going to be doing a little more laundry. That means I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to be doing these things. And my wife was like, she didn't even really know what she needed at the time when we first talked about it, right? And so one of the things to remember, whether it's a job change or just circumstance or moving or anything, is whenever there's a transition, there's going to be a clue that something's changed. And the clue is you're arguing. Right? Your relationship's going. And it makes sense because like, oh, how do you know when things aren't quite right? Is if you're doing this healthy, you're expressing your feelings, you're doing this stuff. And so all of a sudden you have these arguments. And so for me, the clue was, why am I arguing with my wife more about some of these things that up until now had been clicking pretty good? We hadn't been arguing about household chores or doing any of that stuff. We were good with it all. Why are we fighting now about it? Well, she didn't have the time, and I didn't know exactly what to do. She didn't know exactly which ones she was going to ask me to do and which ones she still needed to do. And so that communication is that friction, right? Yeah. And just recognizing that transition time, you're going to get some friction, and friction isn't bad, right? Some people feel like, oh, fighting and arguing is this bad, terrible thing. Now, friction actually means you're close, right? You have some of that where you're rubbing against each other. It's not going good. So you have to be close to have that friction.
Sure.
If me and my wife aren't communicating, and I'm just mad that I'm having to do all these chores and not say anything, we're actually not fighting. We're in our own little worlds, which isn't healthy and isn't good. Yeah. So when we start communicating in friction, we're like, hey, what's going on? And then we can solve the problem. It's like, oh, who's going to do what? And so a lot of times in transitions, I think people know it's coming. And even with your guys' one, you're like, hey, it's going to be a little wild this week, but you didn't know exactly what that was like.
Right.
And your transition was a short one, right? It was 1 week of kind of craziness. Hopefully it's settling down now. My wife goes back to school. I think it was like a year and a half of kind of different changes. So it took some time to adjust. Or if it's a job change or you guys somebody moves somewhere, right? Those transition times are a lot longer. So you really have to be ready with that communication. Just recognize you're probably going to have a few more fights and arguments, but that's not necessarily bad if you can kind of stay in there and solve that. Yeah.
So for a longer transition, which yours was, how do you keep that flowing? Where for ours it's a week, and obviously it'll be.
Well, I would say it's maybe a little more. Yeah, we got water in our basement 2 weeks prior, and then we found mold, and now even just like the summers we prepare for college. In my mind, it feels like the transition is still happening because now we're like preparing for the college send off, but I get what you mean in the scheme of things compared to a new job or a move or something.
But even that right there was healthy communication with you guys. It was a week, right? And your wife's like, I think it's going to be all summer, buddy. Just so you know, it's going to be a little bit. And you're like, oh, yeah, I guess so. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. It was like a 4 week, a couple months prior.
Yeah.
But occupying the space.
I kind of see the fall being a whole nother event.
We'll meet back here again in like August, September, and we'll redo this.
Yeah, that would be great.
For sure. But from an ongoing standpoint, like, what did it look like for you guys? Did you have like weekly, like, hey, my schoolwork is heavy this week. Can you do X, Y, Z? Or I mean, what does it look like on a, when it's a year and a half or 2 years of school? How do you navigate that?
Yeah. That would have been great if we did it. Like, you're good answers, right? You're the organized one, right? I'm like, well, let's just kind of fly by the seat of our pants and figure that out. But what it involved is keeping that communication going, right? It took me a while to figure out, we're fighting, right? Then it was like, hey, we need to talk about what this is. And then it was like, all right, it isn't actually the same thing all the time. It's like, all right, then we did need to keep talking. Hey, I'm going to be good for a little bit. I can take this over. Or I have finals coming up. So, Tony, you're going to need to do this. And a lot of that was a communication. And once you communicate, the problems get solved really easy. So if you're fighting and you're fighting, what happens is you're just sharing emotions, but we're never getting to that resolution or problem solving phase, right? As soon as we kind of hang in there and get to that, and she's like, hey, I have a paper. I'm going to be gone most of this weekend studying and doing this. You're in charge. Oh, I said I was cool supporting you and I'm cool doing that, but I just needed to know that and what that looked like so that when she's disappearing, I'm not like, hey, remember me? I'm still here. Do you love me? Do you care about me? It's like, oh no, I knew this was coming. And so, like you said, well, if you did that every week or had that would be great or awesome. We just did that kind of based on what was going and happening because it was this long-term thing, but it's communicating those expectations, right? And then I started to go, I was like, all right, when are you going to have a little time for me? And she wasn't against that, but if I don't say anything or explain that, then we never get there, right? And she's like, well, not this weekend, Tony, but next weekend things slow down a little bit and we can kind of go and do this. Oh, I can work with that.
Right.
But if we never have that conversation, I'm just waiting. I'm not going to make it that long. And then we're going to have a fight and I'm going to be mad and it's a mess and then I'm going to feel like a jerk. And she's like, well, why are you talking to me when I'm trying to study? And I'm like, oh man, sorry. I missed it because I didn't know.
Right.
I think about, that's really good. I think about another transition that I feel like probably a lot of people are facing this time of year is the transition from school to summer. Do you see clients that is kind of like, can that cause conflict? I mean, that's another transition that probably is really applicable to a lot of people right now.
Absolutely. And kind of twofold. One is my wife's a school teacher.
Okay.
So we had to get used to this transition every year. Right?
Sure.
All of a sudden the summer comes is she's free, has a bunch of time. All of a sudden she's calling me and texting me and I'm like, I'm busy, I'm working, I can't get to this. And then she's like, hey, what are you guys doing? Oh, me and the kids are going to the pool. I'm like, oh, I'm going to work, right? And just trying to figure that out. And then the fall, she disappears. right? Because she's getting back to school. And so those transitions or transitions with kids, right, is trying to figure out, parents, how to get that structure in where it's like, what are your kids going to do? What does that look like? Helping your kids adjust to that. They're used to going 6 hours to school. What's the plan? Are you still getting them up? Do you still have to do chores? Do they have to be done by noon? Do they have to be done by the time mom and dad come home? What does that look like? And so with some of those transitions, even just like small normal ones like summer, is like planning that out. It's the same thing that you want to do with kids that you do with your spouse. Is like, hey, let's talk about this. Here's what this looks like. You're going to have a little friction, right? Deal with it on the front end right away instead of like, oh, I'm not going to say anything. Hopefully my kid will figure it out and start doing his chores. Tell him what your expectations are and what that looks like for the summer.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's so good.
I think that's great advice, Tony. And what I appreciate with what you said is the structure, especially since our kids are coming from every day they have this detailed schedule. We have found with our son that he's third grader now. If I write out a little list, here's a parent tip for you, print it off and then put it in one of those 3-ring binder clear pages. So it's like laminating without laminating it. Get a erasable marker board marker. And then every day he just does it. Because what I found was that if I don't have that for him, even if it's the same thing all summer, I'll say, what do I do? What do I do today? Even in the morning. Yep. What do I do? Brush your teeth. What do I do next? Go potty. What do I do next? Eat breakfast. Just having a little list that he can check through every day. And that continues in the summer. That's been so helpful for us.
Absolutely. And so then when you get those calls or those texts, what do you do? Check the list. Check the list. Oh, yeah. Okay. And so it kind of keeps those conversations up too. It's like, all right, check the list. Check the list.
So structure and communication.
Yes.
Great
Which
tips.
Is going to be a theme with almost everything in counseling, right? Is can we communicate? Can we share our feelings? Can we have a little order or predictable? That's the structure. It's like have a meeting every week. Sit down. How often you can talk with your wife? How often you can talk with your kids, right? Have that structure and communication and it's going to go a lot better.
Yeah. This has been so good, Tony. The other piece that I just like hearing you talk about friction. I think it's so good. Obviously, we're talking about healthy friction, and there's a whole level to that we're not going to dive into. But that's okay. Yeah. I think part of it we tend to be so like, oh, we can't fight, like, oh, fighting is bad, and I mean, obviously, you don't want to be at each other all the time, but I think that friction also means that you're fighting for instead of just against.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's a good point.
One of the scariest things a marriage counselor hears when the couple comes in, we never fight. Oh, crap.
Right.
Because what that means is we never communicate.
Sure.
Because if you're sharing your feelings, they're not going to match. Right? No one has the same feeling at the same time. So we're going to have that friction. And so that isn't bad, right? And so you can maybe pick the words. Are we talking argument? Are we talking a fight, disagreement? All I'm just saying is when the two of you share how you're feeling, it's not going to match.
Yeah.
And that's not a problem. It's totally okay.
I feel like friction can be good, right? I keep thinking of if you want to go camping and you need to start a fire, or if you're having a fire pit, you need a little bit of friction to start something that is intentional and, planned, and you want to have a fire. But also even in our times of friction, right? I feel like we always come out stronger because we have that chance to see from the other person's perspective, work through it together, have a healthy resolve, and then we're stronger because of it. Yeah. Usually we learn something new. Yeah. And then we can adapt and pivot and come out better.
Yeah, absolutely. I like your one with the fire. Friction too is it gives you grip, right? It helps you stay grounded. And you're not slipping and sliding all the way all over the place, right? Race cars, we got to have grip on the tires. You're not sliding everywhere. And so just looking at it is like, do you want your relationship to have grip? Do you want to have that connection? Do you want to be able to burn and do some of those cool things? Okay, that means you're going to have to be willing to talk and be vulnerable and take the risk of, I'm going to share something that probably isn't going to be the same as what my partner feels, but we'll be able to figure it out. And that's what you speak to Michelle, like, hey, but I think we come out the other side okay. That's how you get out the other side, and that's why you feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so great. Tony, thanks for this counseling session. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And to the thousands of people listening, thanks for joining along with us today. Do you want to do something new? We have let's cue the jingle, mystery question. And this is our 3rd episode of doing this.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
And basically, Tony, here's what this is. It's a jar with about 7, I don't know, maybe 10 questions in it. We have no idea what's in there.
Okay, surprise.
You can answer. What we've been doing is we've all been answering, but we'll just do this. If it's a tough question, we'll just let you run with it.
Yeah, that's a great.
Okay.
So
we should just let Tony
can answer for all of us.
Yeah. We'll let Tony.
I'll
Tony
do the classic
draw it.
therapist, read it and go, what do you guys think?
All right. We have no idea.
All right.
Nice.
They've been good so far.
Yeah.
They have like deep questions.
The
too.
question is, how do you work through disagreements in parenting?
All right.
All right. You guys are parents. We'll start with you.
Oh, Tony, I see what you did there.
How do you work through your disagreements?
What is one, like a recent one that we've had with parenting? Can you think of one, Ryan? Oh man, I feel like you have a situation in your head.
No, I don't.
Okay, you
I don't
took
have
like a
anything
deep.
in my
Ryan
head.
just took like a deep sigh of a breath.
And here it comes.
I was like, oh no.
I don't know that I do.
I feel like we have to give people something.
Well,
Let me just think of something here.
okay. While you're thinking,
Yes.
I will tell you, because it kind of feeds into what we were just talking about, right? Is how do you handle those disagreements in parenting? It's that friction piece. Is how you approach it is going to be different. How you approach parenting, Michelle, and how you approach it is going to be a little bit different. And so just one, recognizing those disagreements are okay, right? Me, I'm a little more of the firm one. So when my kid was disrespectful, I'm like, hey, I think you should go outside, pull some weeds out of the rocks, right? My wife's the teacher. She's like, Tony, I think we should sit them down and kind of explain to them why disrespect isn't good and what they need to work on and how they need to be better and why it's important to show respect. I'm like, I'm pretty sure they'll figure it out when they're pulling weeds. Right? And so there's this little piece of how I approach it and how she approaches it is different.
Yeah.
But I know my wife's goal is she wants to teach my kids respect. My wife knows that my goal is I want to teach my kids respect. And so when you have that little disagreement, it's easy for me when she's sitting down and she's talking to them and part of my brain is going, just make them go pull some weeds. It's they're like, nope, back off, Tony. She's got this, right? So I can support her in the idea because we're on the same page with that. The disagreement's going to be in how we actually kind of implement that or do that. And I think God makes it so that there should be a little bit of both. That's why opposites attract and all that stuff. And so just for me, how do you handle those disagreements in parenting is recognize most of the time your spouse is on the same page with you. They just implement it and do it a little bit different. And that's that friction, right? So it's not terrible and awful. I can't argue with what she's saying about, hey, I think she's right. Our kids do need to understand respect and kind of need to be taught and nurtured a little bit of why that's important, where that matters. I'm totally for that. I think she's like, yeah, I think they need to know that they can't just keep doing this. We need to hold them accountable. And so just recognizing those differences, it will feel sometimes like it's rough, but it's just that friction, but you're really on the same page. Long answer. Now you guys can
No,
sorry.
that's great.
Yeah.
I think, Tony, as you were talking about that, kind of the same team thing, it reminded me of so the food debacle at our house. So our 9-year-old is still a very picky eater. Like, this year at lunch, our biggest win was maybe a month ago. He came home and we were like, Thomas, what do you have for lunch today? He was like, a hamburger. And usually by hamburger, that means that he ate the bun that was surrounding the hamburger and the hamburger went in the trash. Like he's like a carbitarian. Like he eats bread and he does eat peanut butter and honey and he's just like, we've tried all the things. We've talked to doctors. Like some of his sensory, I don't know. We've tried and I know people say like, just don't let him leave the table till he clears his plate. Like the kid would not eat. Like he is so stubborn. He would start losing weight. Like he would not eat. We've tried that. It doesn't work. But we got to a point where I think our default was we just found the healthiest chicken nuggets we could, try to get, that like hormone-free, whatever, Dino Buddies, free range, whatever, tried to do our best. But we were getting in this rut of like, it was like every day. And I came to Ryan, I was like, we can't, like, this is a really big deal to me. I feel like we need to diversify. He's just going to turn into a giant dino nugget, like that's all he's eating. Like he can't, this isn't sustaining. Like I feel like he needs to have greens, he needs to have different things. And, that was maybe a season where you were doing more of the dinners or something. So it would you would make that for him. And it was really important to me. So I brought that up and I feel like we worked through it. Then we tried to diversify, some peanut butter sandwiches, some, different things, even like nachos. And I realize, it's just kind of embarrassing saying them all, but we're doing our best and we're trying to get him introduced to new foods. But for a while, it was like the same thing every night. And granted, he gets different things at school, but that was a really big deal to me. And I feel like as even some of the, trying to do things a little cleaner, organic, healthier, you've just been a really good listener and hearing what's important to my heart, listening to even some things if I've, done like research, you just have had an open mind to like, okay, well, we can try to introduce different foods or we can try essential oils or, just different things. You haven't just shut me down. You've been open and listened.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think so much of that comes back to, Tony, what you said of, I know Michelle's heart in the matter, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think I tend to be more direct of like, well, okay, I'm not really concerned about your feelings. You did this. And like, where I
you're
think
a pull the weeds guy. I like it.
Yeah. It's so very much so, and I think but that's been helpful too for me because Michelle, you probably tend to be a lot more gentle.
Mm-hmm. Yes and no. I feel like I've learned some of it from you, though.
All right,
I have.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's great. A good example of just kind of the questions, how do you handle those disagreements is initially they feel like, oh man, this is a great big problem. If we kind of slow down and communicate, we're like, no, we're on the same page. We're trying to help our son eat better. You're going to have different approaches and how that works and what to do it, but you're actually on the same page. And so a lot of these disagreements are always going to feel bigger than they really are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Getting down to like the why of it. It's not just about the why. It's about the why. Okay. Well, I want him to grow and I want him to be nourished with proper nutrition, stuff like that. And then it's like, oh, okay, we're on the same team. We both want that actually.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I
think it's also understanding where the answer is coming from.
What do you mean by that?
I think part of that is, you tend to default to maybe how you were parented.
Mm-hmm.
And so like if you were in this situation, you're not leaving the table until you eat all your food.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's going to be your default. And, so I think about that, especially with the food, like we ate what was on the plate. Like I didn't have a choice of organic free range chicken dino nuggets. Like that wasn't an option, like we had, meat from
out in the yard, the farm,
the cow out the pasture. Like that's what we ate, but you default to that.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes that's, especially when it comes to parenting disagreements, I think it's understanding of where that's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And why it's important.
Yeah.
And understanding that, hey, it's maybe different than what you grew up with or what you know.
Yeah.
But you want the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Same team?
Same team.
Yeah.
Same team.
So good.
Yeah.
Tony, any final parting words for our listeners today?
Transitions are going to happen. They're normal. They're going to cause a little stress. And that stress is opportunities to communicate and grow and come out better on the other side.
Awesome. And you are coming back for 5 Minute Friday. Ryan, do you want to give our listeners a quick preview of what we're talking about this Friday?
Yeah. So we're going to jump into May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I think it's a topic that maybe doesn't get discussed a lot, but is super important. So we thought we just would kind of run through what that actually looks like.
Mm-hmm.
we have a professional counselor here with us. So who better?
Agreed. Tune in. It's not a topic that people talk about enough, but they should, and hopefully it'll be helpful.
We'll look forward to that. Thank you to our listener for joining us today. If you need additional help or marriage resources, visit us at celebrate.church/marriage. We will put a number to a text in comment line in our show notes. We want to hear from you. If you have questions for Tony, if you want to ask a professional counselor, please send those in as well, and we will get to them. If you want to put a question in our mystery jar, let us know. We would love to add that to this jar as well. And we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you on Friday.